Right. And yes, you will probably see Noelle hanging out with her boyfriend if you haven't already seen them hanging out together, because Jack also has Prader-Willi. The short story is during COVID, when nobody had chances to interact, and they set up some Zoom groups to give people social opportunities. They got talking in a Zoom group, developed a friendship. Her father eventually said, "Sure, you can date him because he lives in Mississippi and we live in New York." Um, but we have found ways to get together since then, and really have things. They have a good time together. So that being said, Noelle is definitely my co-presenter today. But I didn't. One of the things I decided not to do was actually write her a script, because more than anything, she definitely is a good advocate for her needs. And if you want, go ahead and move those. Those are Noelle's and mine. You're good. So it's good for her to be able to speak, but also if she has a moment where she's like, I'm not quite sure what to say, you get the chance to see us interact together, and see how we kind of like play off of each other and work through things. So anything you want to add right now? No, we're good? Okay. So, goals for today. Wanting to talk about the feasibility of true independence, because that is one of those big topics. If you spend any time on social media groups, get in discussions, you always hear questions about, like, is your child going to be independent? Are they going to live on their own? Like, how are you making this happen? Like, it's one of those big discussions. So want to talk about whether that's really feasible. Want to talk about the potential long-term outcomes of some of our perspectives that we have when they're younger, about how that may play out and help you prepare for their future. Want to give you an opportunity for reflection with some practical examples thrown in. A couple of things you're not going to get today. You are not going to get a detailed parenting plan. You're not going to get a one-size-fits-all approach. You are definitely not getting advice from a professional or perfect parent, okay? So I always have what I call bad mom moments, and everybody has them. Because a lot of times you talk to speakers and you're like, oh my gosh, they must be like amazing. They must never mess up. Like their household must be wonderful. No, they're just really good at presenting a certain way. Okay? So that's not what you will get from me. I will freely own my mistakes. But what I have really found is if something happens, the best approach is to, and I always have my husband is like, take a breath. I have a moment of grief where I feel horrible and I feel like the worst parent in the world. And I have to be like, you know what, I'm not perfect, I need to move on. And just like let it go. I have to accept, I have to step back and assess what brought us to this situation and what can I do to make it better, and then come up with a plan. So that's the best advice I'm going to be able to give you the whole way through, is don't feel like you have to be perfect. Just always think about how can you work through those situations when they happen. So, I've got mine here because I wrote notes at the bottom, and then we've got the one up there where you get to look at everything else. So, I kind of have a little bit of a difference in definitions here. So, interdependence is one of those things where I've been talking about it for a little while, like as a family. Do you want to slide that over here a little bit, or just turn it sideways?
That's fine.
No, I just don't want you flashing everybody tons of leg. There we go. All right. So, independence is funny because I think if I put out there to everybody, like, how would you define independence? I'd probably get about 20 different answers. And so I did some web research about, like, what are the definitions out there on the internet? And what it comes down to is freedom from the control, influence, support, aid, or the like of others, having full autonomy over one's own life. If you define it like that, that gets a little tricky, right? I mean, let's be honest, how many of us are fully independent? I mean, how many of us are fixing our own car, growing our own food, not consulting with other people? Like, if you really look at that as independence, I don't know that any of us truly are. So then we have discussions about our kids. So interdependence, and this is my own definition, you're not going to find it anywhere. It's one I made up. But the individual with PWS is an active participant in making informed decisions about their future. However, they are reliant on those relational interactions with a guardian for that ultimate decision-making responsibility. We'll get to that in a minute. So, Does that kind of make sense as I'm laying it out, is like kind of laying a framework for interdependence, like what we're going to really be focusing on? And just so you know, obviously no problem if anyone wants to take pictures, but I do think that the PowerPoint slides are going to be available afterwards, correct? Oh, okay. So we can figure that out though if you can't find them. If you do find them though, let me know and we can tell people. All right, so what did I just do? Oh, you know what? All right, did I break it? Entirely possible. Yeah. And part of the reason it's funny is because working in a school, my brother-in-law works in the IT department. I love calling him and be like, I broke it. I need you to come fix it. So, all right.
When teachers need me to call them and
Yeah,
say
I'll just do this. That'll work.
they needed them.
All right, cool. Oh, yes, and Noelle, when she came through the school, was in the same district with us. So people would actually tell Noelle to go get her uncle to help fix things. So, all right, so why focus on interdependence as a goal? And I think one of the things that's fascinating when I was doing a lot of my web research is a lot of the disability community has written all sorts of this stuff about independence and like focusing on it, but a lot of the stuff they're talking about really fits well with this as interdependence. So what I'm gonna say is this is sustainable. So when I say that interdependence is sustainable, so we're talking about building a relationship where the individual can be in conversation with you about what they need. What happens if your child is heavily reliant on you and something happens to you? That's one of our big fears, right? What happens if your child is able to advocate for their own needs and express that with a person that they trust and something happens to you? That can be transferred, right? So it's definitely sustainable. It acknowledges their experience in their inner life. So Noelle is absolutely, and she will laugh as you can see us going back and forth, she has very definite opinions about how things go. She has very definite thoughts, and she's like nodding away, oh yeah. She has very definite like feelings about things. And so by me saying, hey, I want your opinion on this, I want to talk this through with you, I acknowledge that she has those thoughts and feelings, and I'm not going to just tell her how things are going to be. It also allows for that development of advocacy and leadership skills. So as we're talking through things, she's better able to advocate for herself, and then she can speak up to other people about what she needs. She's not relying on me to be the person saying, hey, this is what she needs. She's able to say for herself, hey, can you please put that food away? Hey, can you please make sure that the kitchen is locked, Mom? Hey, can you, like, she can do those things because we've built that capacity. It builds stronger relationships. We get along pretty well. We butt our heads. We have moments. Thank you, Noelle, for the nod and the smile.
You're welcome.
But we have a strong relationship in that we can talk about things and work our way through things. But when we talk about interdependence, it allows me to always put an emphasis on safety. So we're always working through how do we keep her safe? What are her needs and what does she need? And she is fully aware that the reasons that we make these decisions are to make sure what?
Keep me safe.
All right. She knows it. She can tell other people that. So, sorry, and I think too, just it acknowledges that there's not anything wrong with being dependent on other people. So like there's always moments where we all need something from other people, right? Like, yeah, no, we're good. But everybody needs something from somebody else at one point in time, right? So the communication that I'm having with her is everybody needs somebody, not you have a disability and you need to be dependent on me. So it allows us to build those relationships and also really kind of normalize her experience. And one of the things that, like when I talk about normalizing experience, kind of a practical example that isn't so much about interdependence, but when my kids were younger, if you've seen me around, have you seen me around with a really tall kid as well. Well, I say kid, he's 19 now. That's my youngest son. He ate constantly.
He's the bottomless pit.
He is a bottomless pit. And he needed to. Obviously could not, because we had to really monitor. So our policy at home was never, Noelle needs a special diet. It was always, everybody gets what they need. So Noelle needs to eat a certain way to make sure she stays healthy. Logan needs to eat a certain way to make sure he stays healthy. It was never about, oh, you've got Prader-Willi. It was always like, hey, everybody gets what they need. If Logan eats like her, he's going to be sick. But if you eat like Logan, he's going to be sick. As they got older, the rule at dinner time was everybody gets seconds. Seconds for Logan was a second plate of macaroni and cheese. Seconds for Noelle were vegetables. But they had the same rule. Everybody gets what they need. So a couple just quotes that I was like, sometimes you just read quotes and you're like, I couldn't do better than that. I'm just going to borrow somebody else's stuff. So this disability justice activist says, interdependence moves us away from the myth of independence and towards relationships where we're all valued and have things to offer. It moves us away from disability only through dependence, which paints disabled bodies as being a burden to others, at the mercy of able-bodied people's benevolence. And then another one about changing, it's another disability justice idea. This work is about shifting how we understand access, moving away from the individualized independence frame notions of access put forth by the disability rights movement, and instead working to view access as collective and interdependent. I'm not fighting for independence, that everyone can and should be able to do everything on their own, as much as the disability rights movement's rallies behind. I am fighting for an interdependence that embraces need and tells the truth. Nobody does it on their own. So, developing this sort of mindset. So I'll get to you eventually, Belle, I promise.
You're good.
All right. So the idea, and when I say this about developing a mindset, some of you probably have really young kids, some of you have much older kids. And just like I said before about not a perfect parent, and always looking at where we go forward. If you haven't been doing some of this stuff and you're like, now's the time to start, okay? If you've got a young kid, start young. Because really the examples I gave about everybody gets what they need in terms of eating, they were 2 and 3. So we started really young. Everything was about just really kind of thinking about the fact that when we have our typical kids, and you're parenting, you're teaching skills, right? Everything takes a little bit longer in terms of teaching skills to kids with Prader-Willi, and you have to think a little bit more about it, but you can still do that and build that as they're going along. So really the goal is, you looked out to that long-term future of work towards supporting, not managing every interaction and decision. It's gradual. And it should apply for any other kid. I mean, we give our kids, toddlers, way more support than when we do our teenagers and then adults. But you can start with the day-to-day things. Just talking through different situations, managing that. Building decision-making capacity. When they're little, that could be things like, what do you want for snack? And one thing I should go back and say as we're doing this, when I said I'm not going to give you a one-size-fits-all approach, the reason I said that I'm not going to give you a one-size-fits-all approach is because all of our kids are different. And I want you to take anything I say in that context and apply it to what you know about your own kid. So for example, I had another friend whose son had Prader-Willi, and we were getting together, and some of the other kids wanted to have lemonade. And I looked at Noelle, and I said, okay, here's the deal. If you have that lemonade, you're going to have to miss out on this later. What do you want to do? Which do you want to have, right?
Like last night was a good example.
Oh, what did we do? Do you want to stand up so they can hear you at the mic?
So last night, obviously, I'm 21, so
You'll see why this is coming.
and whenever I get a chance, I like to have something new.
Like a drink with alcohol in it.
So last night, we were at dinner, and I was obviously looking at the drink menu. But then Mom brought me over and said, I'm thinking about doing this and getting this, which was ice cream when we went to Disney Springs. And she's like, what, do you want to do that or give something up? And I said, well, I would want to do that because I have a niece, my older brother, Steven, which her name is Evelyn. But we were thinking about bringing something back for it, and we couldn't really find anything that we an interest in, so we.
So you wanted to go shopping.
Yeah.
And what did you choose?
So I chose not to have a drink.
Because you wanted to have something over at Disney Springs. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, I was all in. But my friend's son would have been able to do that. Like, she just had to look at him and say, you're not having lemonade. Because for him, he just needed the guidelines. So think about what you know about your own kid as we go through a lot of this discussion, because obviously likes control. Other kids might want you to be a little bit more direct. So I don't want to in any way sound like if you can't do things exactly the way Noelle and I are presenting that it feels like a failure, because your kid is different and they deserve that right to be that individual. And you deserve that right to be a different parent. So, but building decision-making capacity in whatever terms. Obviously, this was a discussion we could have. And she was able to weigh in on it. It really promotes communication. So instead of telling someone, what to do, this is the way it's going to be, giving them that opportunity, asking them what they would like to do. That being said, it doesn't mean you do exactly what they say. Okay? Just because you've asked what they like doesn't mean that you're going to be like, oh, okay, let's do that. You might have to have further discussion about, okay, here's the consequences. Here's what's going to happen if we choose this. Because Noelle's first thought was, I really still kind of want that drink at dinner. And I was like, well, just so you know, though, if I have something later, you might be a little upset. And she was like, yeah, no, that's true. So we came back and revisited. You're going to have to acknowledge your own struggles and your own mistakes as we go through this. There are things about parenting your kid that stress you out, right? Disabled kid or no. You bring your own experience to this. I mean, maybe your parents did things a certain way and you're kind of going against that, or you're trying to build on it, or that you've just had a really crappy day wherever you were, and like you're carrying all that baggage into a situation. It is okay to say to your kid, I'm sorry, I'm having a rough day. Or we had a couple situations, and Noelle's going to laugh at this one. There are some times when Noelle will, probably a good example is that there was a time that you maybe stole something from the kitchen, and I was like, did you do that? And she's like, nope. And I was like, you need to tell me the truth. Nope. And I was like, you are going to get in trouble if you're not honest with me. Didn't do it. You're not going to go to dance if you're not honest with me. Didn't want to dance anyway. Like, the curtain came down behind her eyes. Like, you could literally see her just shut down. And afterwards, I had to step back, and I was in tears, and I said to my husband, I just screwed that up so royally. That was the wrong way to go about it. She was not going to, this was just not going to work, and I just made a mess. And he's like, take a breath, talk to her tomorrow. I was like, okay. I hate it when you're right. But I came in the next, he's right a lot, isn't he?
Yep.
Okay. So I came back the next morning, I was like, listen, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have threatened to take away dance. And she looked at me and went, what do you mean? And I was like, I threatened to take away all that you love and hold dear. And she was like, what are you talking about? She didn't remember. Now, but I think that when you talk about that relationship building, being able to own it, I was like, I shouldn't have gotten in your face. We should have done this differently. I'm sorry, we need to reset. It builds that relationship there too. It gives me the freedom to be able to go back and revise what I did. Yeah.
What would you have done instead? This happens to me a lot. When
Yeah.
It's getting down to the wire and
Yes.
nothing's working. Not
Yeah.
the bride or the
Yeah, and I think, so in this case, no, number one, I have learned.
Repeat her question. I
Yes.
might
Oh, I'm
have
sorry.
there.
She had said, what would I have done differently? Okay? So in this case, I have since learned that did you do it is not the way to ask. I have now learned where did you put it is the right question. Because do you not usually tell me the truth when I ask where it is? And she'll even be like, and sometimes she'll be like, I don't have it, but I don't have it means I've already disposed of the evidence. But we've also talked through about communication styles. She is not able to tell me in the moment if she did something. How is your best way of communicating? She texts me. So she will send me a text and say, I'm sorry, this is what I did. It might take her a day or two to get there, but she will generally own it. So I think thinking about your wording, a lot of times when you ask either yes/no questions, it gives you the opportunity to get a yes/no answer that you may not like. And thinking about how can you structure that question in a way that's going to actually get you an answer. Why is let's be honest about it. Most of our kids have language delays. And how many of you had goals written around WH questions? Probably everybody here. But why is always the last one that comes in the chronology. You start with what and who and when. Why is always the last one. Why really involves a lot of abstract thinking that most kids just aren't getting to. So start with those really basic WH questions that you can actually get an answer to. Another thing is assessing the risk of the possible outcome. In that moment, I was pretty confident she had eaten what I was looking for. At that point, it was irrelevant whether I got an answer. I was so focused on whether or not I got an answer that I missed the fact that it didn't matter what she told me. It's something that could wait. I knew where she was. I knew she was safe. I knew the kitchen was locked. At that point, it didn't matter. We could come back and revisit it at a time when I could just say, hey, you know what? We're going to talk about this later. And we'll come back. Because in the moment, I'm heated, she's mad, she's shut down. We're not going to get anywhere. So as long as your child is safe and you don't have an imminent crisis, those are things you can come back to at a time when you don't have the emotions messing with the whole process. I hope that helps a little bit. And I will say, a lot of this I don't do well. I always have to come back. So there we go, coming to that one, talking might not be the most effective. What works for them? My texting friend. Other people might, write you a note. Some kids might just have to, show you something. But think about what works well for your kid. And honesty, around the syndrome and the resulting impact on your child. If you're going to want to teach advocacy in the long run, you got to be able to call it for what it is. She has Prader-Willi syndrome. Other people have diabetes. Why do we almost shame ourselves about wanting to tell someone or our kid that they have Prader-Willi syndrome? It's just a diagnosis. We're the ones adding all of the emotion and everything else to it. So being able to say, okay, so because you have this is why we have to do things a little bit differently. For example, and I'll kind of just veer off, and I apologize if I ramble. I tend to talk too much and ramble. But when we got to 4th grade, they always have the big, coming into your own development, the basis of sex ed discussion in school. Now, we had a lot of discussions about how your diet is different because of your syndrome. So all I could think was, they're going to have this discussion about menstruation. And she's going to be like, when's that going to happen for me? And what's it going to look like? And all this other stuff. I don't know that it's going to happen. I don't know when it's going to happen. And I really don't want to have that discussion with a kid that's developmentally delayed. So what I did was I went into school and I said, all right, here's the deal. I want to have these discussions. You are going to be causing me a lot of discussions I'm not ready to have if we insist on doing this right now. So here's what I'm going to talk with her about. I'm going to pull her that day. And we pulled her out. Sorry. And what I said to Noelle was, remember how we always talked about how your body tends to do things a little bit differently than everybody else's? And she was like, yeah. I said, they're going to talk about a lot of stuff that your body's going to do differently. So I'd rather have us have those discussions later, and then, you know, that way it doesn't get confusing. Because she would have come home from school and been like, they said that it's this, and this, and I would have been like, but because I was able to say to the school, I'm going to have this discussion, I was able to say to her, yeah, this is going to be a little different for you. It gave us the freedom to just go back and have a talk about it later without it being something super stressful for everyone. So, and then there's obviously a lot of different things. I mean, we've had to have discussions down the road about, you know, like, I'm sorry, is there anybody else with Prader-Willi in this room? I just want to make sure. Because one of the other discussions we had at one point was when they started talking about, what's that? Anybody? Oh, we're good. We're good on what I'm about to say. So one of the discussions we had to have was about the fact that she wasn't able to have children. And I know that that is one of those really big things about how do you have that discussion. And we really had to talk it through, right?
Yep.
But we did, because your body does things differently.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have friends who had had different discussions about that?
Yes.
And you were very worried about being the one that broke the news and making other people feel bad and everything else. So some of those discussions can be tricky, but I feel like it's so much better to be able to have them yourselves. And unfortunately, there's a lot of, nobody wants to have the talk with their kids. It's no more fun when your kid has a disability and you have to talk about it. But sometimes you just have to bull your way through it, but you do. So, but here's my biggest concern when we talk about this. We want to protect our kids. We want to care for them. We want to do everything we can to keep them safe. And not giving them a voice in how that may play out down the road means that they're going to have no concept of decision-making power. So if you get to an age where you're like, all right, here you go, you're on your own, they have in no way developed the capacity to make decent decisions. We have just completely placed them at risk because we have guarded them so closely and never had any discussions that they have never developed any skills. On the flip side, if you have this discussion, you can do anything. You are going to be typical, you are going to be like everybody else, it's going to be the way it is, and then you get to be 16 or 17, and it's like, oh, sorry, you're not going to do that. What do you think is going to happen with your kid? There's going to be fights, there's going to be anger, there's going to be sadness, there's going to be depression, what's that? Disappointment. And there's no research out there, so this is just my opinion, so take it for what it's worth. But I think that when we don't build decision-making capacity in our kids, and we just tell them, you're free to go, that's overwhelming and scary. But if they never get to make a decision, and then you tell them that they can't, you've got a whole different set of consequences. So, do you want to share, you wrote it for this one. Do you want to share, this is a good example of kind of like what we had worked through. Do you want to share about?
The driving?
Yes. So Noelle came to me, because guess what everybody does when they're 16? They get licenses. So, do you want to, you can go ahead and read what you wrote.
So when I was 16, I wanted to drive, but when I asked my parents if I could drive, they said no. So I was disappointed and sad, but I had a sorry. Sorry, I lost my place.
It's okay. You were sad. You were disappointed.
I had
And then, okay, let's see here. I can't
Sorry.
read either. I don't have my glasses on. So, oh, and then your question was why?
Question was why. Why? And mom and dad said driving wouldn't be safe for my health. Mom said that. Wait a minute. Sorry.
You're okay. I know it's tough speaking in front of people, isn't it?
Just a little bit.
I know. I'm going to tell you right now, you're not alone. Nobody else out here wants to stand up here in front of everybody.
Mom said that if you could drive, what would you do? I said I could stop anywhere and get food, which obviously wouldn't be healthy, wouldn't be safe.
I think that was the biggie.
Yeah.
But then, one of the other things we talked about is, I said, because a lot of times you'll hear people say, oh, I'll let them learn, but then, they have to drive with me. What did I say to you? Do you remember?
No.
What's going to stop you from stealing my keys and going? Like, if she knows, then I have just opened the door. Because would you steal keys?
Yeah.
So we had that discussion. Was there some disappointment? There was some grieving. Like, she cried. It was hard. But there was a rationale that we talked about. We talked about what could be the possible outcomes. Why would we make this decision? And what's our bottom line? And what is Dad's and my bottom line always? Keeping you
Safe.
Yeah. So that is how we came back to it. All right, thank you. I won't torture you
No,
anymore for the
it's
moment.
okay.
Okay. So like opportunities for teaching. And and let me pause right there. Do you guys have any questions about anything I've said? Anything where you're either wow, I think you're really off base, or whew, I'd never really thought of it that way before, or can you elaborate on something?
You say instead of telling what to do, ask them. Well, most often mine will present a choice that's not safe.
Yeah. All right, so for those of you who couldn't hear, she said that if she asks that question, her child will give her the option that's not safe. So perhaps what you would want to do is be like, you know what? I'd really like your thoughts on this, but certain things aren't going to be on the list because they're just not safe choices right now. You might have to back it up to talking about choices. So I always say if you're going to give a choice, make sure that it's things that you can always live with. So when they're little, what do you want to wear? Do you want to wear the red shirt or the blue shirt? I might not say, do you want to wear, go pick something out because it's the middle of winter and they're going to come back with shorts. So I pick out two possible options to say, okay, which one do you want to do? Which one sounds better?
So you're coming up with the choices, they're not.
But when you get to the point where you can give an open-ended question, then you can do that. If you know that you are not going to get an answer that's acceptable, then you got to back it up a step and say, okay, I'm going to give you some options, knowing it's whatever you decide of those options, all you, bud, I'm in. You get that choice, but don't give them an option that you're going to be like, no. That's part of the progression, because think about it. With little kids, do you give a 2-year-old a wide open option? You give them choices that are both okay. As they get a little bit older, then you can start to expand it. This is where you gauge it with your own kid. So if you know they're going to pick something that's not safe, don't go open-ended, because then you're going to bite yourself in the butt. You're going to get yourself into a place where you then have to have a discussion about it. Now, if you know that your child is at that kind of middle ground where they will be able to discuss afterwards why that's not okay, then you can do that. So for example, with Noelle, when she said, why can't I drive? I was like, okay, so let's talk about what would happen if you did that. How would it go? How would it play out? And so then we could have that discussion. And we started doing that a little bit younger, so probably a good non-safety related answer or example is when she was younger, she loved to wear crazy outfits. Like embarrassingly crazy outfits. And I was always like, and my first thought was, I'm sick of fighting with her about this. Because if I say I don't want you wearing that, then she's like, nah, that's what I'm wearing. Like, it's good. And I was like, okay. And so I started, one day I looked at her and I said, here's the deal, Noelle. I'm going to tell you right now, that outfit is killing me. Like, it is bad. You're going to get to school, and people may very well make fun of you for that. So, do you care if they make fun of you? And she was like, and in the moment, it was a Prader-Willi, nope, I don't care, that's fine. And I said, well, okay, so if somebody makes fun of you, do you have any idea how you're gonna handle it? And she was like, tell the teacher, I was like, okay, fine. I said, but I want you to know right now, when you come home, if someone makes fun of you, am I going to feel bad and go in and defend you? And she was like, nope.
Nope.
And I said, are you going to have to deal with it? Yep. And I was like, okay, have at. The problem in that situation was she went to school and everybody told her how cool she looked. It's like, you've got to be killing me here. I was like, I'm trying to teach them skills here and I'm getting nowhere. But in that situation, that was not a safety risk. So you can potentially have discussions about why. There are going to be times when things are just a safety risk and you know that that can't be an option. That is okay.
The best way is for them to come up with the why, not you.
In terms of talking it through?
Yes.
Yes, but they're not going to be able to think, I'm going to tell you right now, they won't be able to think of the why. They're going to look at you and be like, because? You're going to have to be thinking of the next step of, okay, so here's the logical outcomes. Here's going to be what happens. Here's what might happen. So you're going to have to do all the thinking because they're not going to be able to come up with that on their own. So as part of having those discussions, it's you start basic with here's your two choices, then you're, okay, well, what do you think? And then walking them through the why, if that makes sense.
Well, we usually talk about previous
Yeah.
events, and then we say, okay, so what did you do here? So with my son, he's going to be 15. He's wanting to drive, but he stares at things off the thing.
Yeah.
So one incident, he was staring at a person, and he ran into the Walmart cement things. And
yeah.
we talked about that. I said, okay, now if you're in a car and you're staring off to the left, what could happen?
Yeah.
And he
Yep, no, and that's perfect. So he was sharing, for those of you who couldn't hear before he had the mic, his son wants to be able to drive, and he's referring back to past experience. Bud, you kind of tend to stare off. You tend to zone out. You tend to bump into things even when you're not even behind the wheel of a car. So these are the things that we're considering when we have this discussion. Also great because it gives them that point of reference. But the other thing is, it's not just about saying, this is why I'm not letting you do it. You are building the capacity to say, this is who you are. This is how you tend to deal with things. What would be a good decision for you?
Our two things is not just safety, but our other one is inappropriate.
Yeah, and that's fair too.
He's 15 and he's already went through the puberty stage because he had growth hormone.
Yeah.
So a lot of things that he could have done when he was younger, he still wants to do now. So it's safety and inappropriate. is the
Yeah.
things for us.
And a lot of times, one of the things, and it's funny because we're having a sort of discussion with a student at school who has autism, and he has sensory needs and he tends to get too close, and he's probably inappropriately touched somebody. And I get it, that comes from an area of his disability, but the reality is, that is not okay to society at large. So I'm sorry, I get why this is tough for you, but this is not going to work out for you. You will be arrested when you're older if this happens. I'm sorry, my friend, I get that it's tough. But I think that those are both really valid points. Knowing yourself and your strengths and weaknesses, and then knowing what's going to cause you legal trouble down the road. Because sometimes those are the situations where it just has to be hard and fast. This isn't a choice. You're absolutely right. It's not a choice. And sometimes that word inappropriate, I agree with you, it's inappropriate. Sometimes that's a really hard concept to wrap your mind around. And I say that from a professional standpoint because I've gone into, when we're trying to do behavior plans for some students, and somebody will say, it's not appropriate for them to do that. I'm like, define inappropriate for me. Because for one person, it's, they looked at me funny. For another person, it's, they walked up and kicked me. Like, it's one of those things that's hard to really define. I don't disagree, so please don't think I'm bashing it.
We don't use inappropriate
Yeah.
to him, we just say, you can't
Perfect.
walk
Yeah.
around like this because
Yep.
that's not
Yep, perfect.
acceptable.
Yeah.
We don't ever use
No,
it,
perfect.
because
Yeah.
you wouldn't know what that is.
And that's but it's a very valid point. But we do that as adults all the time. We use, we say that. So I'm sorry, there was somebody else who had their hand up. Yeah, sorry.
And we're going to have question and answer at the end. It's easier, I think, but
Oh, okay,
with this,
'cause I
it's
just-
up to you how you want to run it. If you would rather at the time, that's fine.
I'm moving pretty well. I really, to be honest, I planned for a lot of discussion. Like I didn't have,
I was just asking about your statement around helping them with learning decision-making and sorry, I'm getting over a cold, so I'm trying to get my thoughts straight, but sort of helping them to know about their diagnosis. How do you, so my kiddo's 3,
Yeah.
how do you sort of have that discussion at different points without sort of like casting out future hope for their life and for their decisions,
Yeah, I think that's
especially
fair.
with like medical advances and just in
Yeah,
general?
Yeah, and that's fair. And so I think when they're younger, stick to where they're at right now. So like, you're gonna be regulating their diet. You're not gonna, like if they have hyperphagia, you're gonna be building those structures in. And you could say something as simple of, there's things about how you want food that we need to make sure you're safe. So we need to start here. And then kind of keep building and opening up the discussion. And I think I have it later on, but one of the things I've always said is those tough discussions, like a lot of times it comes up at school if we lose a student, like they passed away, and nobody knows what to do with that. And they're like, what do you say to little kids? How do you deal with this? What do you do? And I'm like, just answer their questions until they stop asking. And you don't have to come up with something big and elaborate. Just stick to the basics in the moment, and then if they have additional questions, you can deal with those. You don't have to think all the way out, because you're right, things could change. You okay? All right. Part of the reason, and this is for us, like, I'm gonna be honest with you, for your younger parents, and it's kind of like a harsh reality, but I think that we've worked through really well. There was talk about a cure when she was 3. Okay? We have been hoping that we would get there. She's 21. I've been through 2 medical trials, and I was like, all right, and we still don't have it. And I'm sitting here looking at what's gonna happen, and I'm like, I know, and Noelle's gonna get really bummed out because she's had some really good experiences. But my long-range planning has always been, could she be independent and know herself if the right medications came along? But yet, also teaching capacity to know that I'm gonna be the backup. I'm gonna be the person making the calls and the decisions. So when they're younger, stick with it, pretty simple discussions, but not, go there. And then as they get older, just kind of take it as it comes. Don't feel like you have to have a full plan. But if you discuss the syndrome openly in terms of where it's got you right now, that allows you to keep having the conversations down the road. Whereas I've had some friends who don't tell their kids until they're like 15 or 16. And I'm like, what have you been telling them all this time? Like, why do they think you're doing all this stuff? And they just don't want to bum them out and upset them. And I'm like, we're not going to protect them from like other diagnoses. Why are we making this one a big deal? And the other thing about that is when you go into school, and you talk about this, if you haven't talked about the syndrome and your child does start to have behavioral problems, you have no legal leg to stand on to defend them from the consequences of what happened. So if I had just said, she's really excited about food, like I just need you to make sure there's none around, and then, You steal a candy bar, you swipe something, which she'll laugh about, but I wouldn't have had any grounds to be able to argue with the school about why they should have been doing things differently. So that's a whole other topic. But like, these are some of the things where like you can have these discussions around, like, you know, self-care, safety, dressing, things like that, appropriately expressing yourself. Like, and this is tough because some of our kids have really significant behavioral issues that they really struggle with. And they don't have the self-regulation to be able to like step back afterwards. Some of our other kids can be taught that. And so take what I'm saying right now with a grain of salt, because I'm not saying that anyone is wrong or hasn't parented their kids well if they don't have the same experience. When she was little and she got mad, hey Bill, you with me?
Yeah.
All right. Do you want to go sit down for a minute and I'll call you up if you need it? Okay. When she was little, she would like just scream about stuff. And I was like, where's your safe place to do this? And we had like one of those little tents. But it was this little fabric tent that had her stuffed animals, and I'd be like, you know what? Go in there and scream. I'm not listening to it out here. And she'd
When
take,
you're ready.
yeah, that's exactly what I said. Come out when you're ready. And she would go in there, and it was her safe place, and she would scream, she would yell, she would throw her animals, and she would come out when she was calm. I'm like, you ready to talk? Yep, okay. And then after a while, you'd see her go, and I'd look at her and just go, and she'd stomp in there and do it. And then after a while, there was one night where like she went, and she turned and stopped into the tent all on her own, and I went, she just timed herself out. This is awesome. But, okay, 10 minutes, all right. Oh, man, I could just talk forever. Sorry, guys. But sometimes you can take those steps about making sure that they have a safe place to have the meltdown or where they could go. But if you start having those conversations when they're 2 and 3, it makes it a whole lot easier the older they get to give them a safe place to go. What are my strengths and weaknesses? You know, social skills, play skills. Like, you know, most of our kids figure out how to play with peers. Well, most of our kids here do not figure out how to play with peers on their own. Our typical kids tend to do a whole lot less instruction. Most skills have to be broken down. Sorry, I'm distracted.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I know, your belly's thinking. I'll put you to work in just a second. All right. A lot of times it's talking through like what the skills are, giving them a chance to practice it with you, practice it with their siblings, thinking about how it feels. Sometimes it's pacing it back. Noelle, do you remember when you used to like wake me up in the morning because you wanted to eat? And how would you wake me up? No, it wasn't that. She used to like sit on my stomach and stare at my face. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, you were young. And I was like, you cannot wake me up until there's a 6 on the clock. Wrong call. The next step at 4:36 was 6 needs to be the first number on the clock. So then we moved to 6. Then it was I came down the stairs and, what are you going to feed me? Can I just get a good morning first? So we now, when I come down the stairs, she's like, hey Mom, how'd you sleep? Can you get me breakfast? Sure, okay. But really had to work our way through the little incremental steps. Same thing for, you know, social skills, similar things. But self-reflection, giving them a chance to think about what do I do well and what's tough for me. And I really emphasize the words, what's tough for me, because if we say you can't do that because of your disability, we've just taken power and control away. And the reality is we all have stuff that's tough for us. I have no short-term memory, okay? It's never gonna get better. It's not a disability, but I just can't do it. I have learned the strategies that work for me. I have to have lists. I have to be able to cross them off. Why should we do it any differently for our kids that are gonna struggle with something? So, you know, struggling because I'm hungry, my belly's talking to me. You know, how can we work our way through it? This is tough for me. But being able to say that that's not wrong. What am I interested in? What do I like to do? What do I want to do with my life and why? Even those long-term discussions can be how, you might have to back it off, but like, what sort of stuff, even if you're living with me, what would you want to do? But, you know, just that advocacy, being able to say, what do I need and how can I get it? A really good example is when she was in elementary school. Everybody have the beloved parties that come in with food and you never know about them, they're coming. We had our contingency plan, and everybody was supposed to let me know and everything, but we had gotten to the point, because she knew what felt better to her, that the aide would come to her and say, okay, so somebody's coming in with something. Do you want to go for a walk, or do you want to stay and have one of your own snacks that you brought in? And she got to make the call. And so it got to the point where she knew that there was something coming in. She'd be like, yeah, we're going for a walk today. Like, that's just what we're going to do. So, and I think we've talked about a lot of this stuff as we've gone through. You know, pairing those behavioral choices with the potential outcomes, doing it in advance. Natural consequences. Like, okay, so we did this. Did it get you what you wanted? I'm going to guess that it didn't, so like, what could we have done different? Modeling it, they need to see it. A lot of our kids aren't going to be big talkers. They're just not going to process the language, so it's better to like walk them through it and show them. Allowing ability to take chances and fail, only if it's safe. Clothing choice is safe. You know, I'm trying to think of another one. Like, there are some things that it's okay to not have go well. There's
The why.
I'm only laughing because that example is I allowed the adults a chance to fail, and it freaked them all out. Long story short, I went in, I walked them through the whole Prader-Willi thing. They looked at me like I was crazy, and I was like, well, okay. Like, there was so little food there that I was like, it can't be too bad. All right, have at it. Let's see how it goes. And I was met when I walked in one day, and they all looked really panicked. And they're like, Noelle went in the cabinet, and there was a bottle there of food coloring, and she saw that it said food, and she drank the whole thing. And my thought in the moment was, gotta call poison control. I'm not gonna hurt anybody right now. So I went home, I called. Food coloring's not gonna kill you. But I came back in, but let me tell you, they failed, and they towed the line from there on out. We had no problems. Honesty at their developmental level. It might mean minimizing the details while staying true to facts. So, you will be sick if I feed you this way. It's the truth. It doesn't give every single detail of, you know, what could happen, but it definitely stays true to the facts. Monitoring growth. Are they able to conceptualize risk as part of the making decisions? If you're at the point where they can't conceptualize the risk, you're not ready to really open it up to some of the bigger decisions. But if you're at a point where you can say in advance, okay, we have to make this big decision, what do you think will happen? And allowing them to talk about what that risk might look like, or you know, how it will play out. Because we get to the point where, can they accept the rationale for the safeguards that you have in place? That's another really big one. Are they just going to fight you tooth and nail and everything, or are they going to be like, okay, fair, I gotcha. And then, what will be the impact of my child if he or she is able to attain their anticipated goal? That's what I was talking about previously with my soapbox about their mental health. One of the things, this is my closing thought, but I'm going to have Noelle stand up next to me while I ask her one question that I do want you guys to hear the answer to. So, you parent in the hope that a cure or a treatment will become available, but you plan with the anticipation that it will not. So everything we've done, I've been looking for being able to cut her loose if something becomes available. But she knows why I'm making those decisions, and so she's been a part of the conversation. But we're in the process of looking at guardianship. Okay, so I've got a kid who IQ is not below 70. Graduated with the highest level of diploma that New York State gives in 4 years. Which
And
is,
a Regents diploma too.
yeah, that's the highest level. Sorry, yeah.
Sorry.
And we fully anticipated it was going to take longer than 4 years, and I thought I was going to have time to plan for what came afterwards, and yeah, thanks. I had a crisis, like a parenting crisis, because I realized she was graduating and I didn't have a plan because she made it out in 4 years versus 5 or 6. I never dreamed she'd pass the test. I was like, she's killing me. So now I'm hanging out. But, so I've got this kid, she doesn't sound like somebody that should have guardianship, right? What do you think about us being guardians?
Amazing, because I know it's another way to keep me safe.
So, what does guardianship mean to you?
Well, it just keeps me safe, like lock kitchens and pantries, and I don't have access to money.
Yeah, money that could get you places.
Yep.
How do you think it's going to work with making decisions about things?
I'll have some say, but you and Dad will have the final say.
So, she's actually prepared to go in and talk to a judge and tell him exactly that. She's prepared to say, this is why I want it. I know I don't look like I should, but this is why I want it. And the really cool thing about it is it's still her, like, that's the decision she made. Because we had the dialogue all along to get her to that point. I am sorry, I ran my mouth way too much, and we've run out of time.